YouVersion app, Amplified Bible, Classic Edition, AMPC, 1 Samuel 17. Now the Philistines gathered their armies for battle, and were assembled at Succoth, which belonged to Judah, and encamped between Succoth and Azekah and Ephidim. Saul and the men of Israel were encamped in the valley of Elah, and drew up in battle array against the Philistines. And the Philistines stood on the mountain on one side, and Israel stood on the mountain on the other side, with the valley between them. And a champion went out of the camp of the Philistines named Goliath of Gath, whose height was 6 cubits and span almost 10 feet. And he had a bronze helmet and a head and wore a coat of mail, and the coat weighed 5,000 shekels of bronze. He had bronze shin armor on his legs and bronze javelin across his shoulders, and the shaft of the spear was like a weaver's beam. His spear head weighed 600 shekels of iron, and a shield bearer went before him. Goliath stood and shouted in ranks of Israel, "Why have you come out to draw up for battle? Am I not a Philistine? And are you not servants of Saul? Choose a man for yourselves, and let him come down to me. If he is able to fight with me and kill me, then we will be your servants. But if he prevails against him and kills him, then you shall be our servant and serve us." And the Philistine said, "I defy the ranks of Israel this day. Give me a man that we may fight together." When Saul and all the Israel heard these words of the Philistines, they were dismayed and greatly afraid. David was the son of Ephraim and Bethlehem in Judah, named Jesse, who had 8 sons. Jesse in the days of Saul, who was old, advanced in years. His 3 eldest sons had followed Saul into battle. Their names were Eliab and firstborn next Abinadab, and third Shammah. David was the youngest. The 3 eldest followed Saul. But David went back and forth from Saul to feed his father's sheep at Bethlehem. The Philistines went out morning and evening, presenting himself for 40 days. And Jesse said to David his son, "Take for your brothers an ephah and parched grain and these 10 loaves and carry them quickly to your brothers at the camp. Also take these 10 cheeses and commander of their thousands. See how your brothers fare and bring some token from them." Now Saul and his brothers and all the men of Israel were in the valley of Elah, fighting with the Philistines. And David rose up early next morning, left the sheep and the keeper, took the provisions, and went on as Jesse had commanded him. And he came to the encampment as the hosts going forth in the battleground shouted the battle cry. And Israel and the Philistines put the battle in array, army against army. David left the packages in the care of the baggage keeper and ran into the ranks and came greeted his brother. And they talked, "Behold, Goliath the champion, the Philistine of Gath, came forth from the Philistine ranks and spoke the same words as before." And David heard him. And all the men of Israel, when they saw the man, fled from him, terrified. And the Israelites said, "Have you seen this man who has come out? Surely he has come out to defy Israel. And the man who kills him, the king, will enrich with great riches and will give him his daughter and make his father's house free from taxes and service in Israel." And David said to the men standing by him, "What shall be done for the man who kills this Philistine and takes away the reproach from Israel? For who is this uncircumcised Philistine, that he should defy the armies of the living God?" And the men told him, "Thus shall it be done for the man who kills him." Now Eliab, his eldest brother, heard what he said to the men of Eliab. Anger was kindled against David, and he said, "Why did you come here? When whom have you left those few sheep in the wilderness? I know your presumption and evilness of heart, for you came down that you might see the battle." And David said, "What have I done now? Was it not a harmless question?" And David turned away from Eliab in another, and he asked the same question. And again the men gave him the same answer. When David's words were heard, they were repeated to Saul, and he sent for him. David said to Saul, "Let no man's heart fail because of the Philistines. Your servant will go out and fight with him." And Saul said to David, "You are not able to go to fight against the Philistine. You are only an adolescent, and he has been a warrior from your youth." And David said to Saul, "Your servant kept his father's sheep, and when there came a lion, or again a bear, and took a lamb out of the flock, I went out after it and smote it and delivered the lamb out of its mouth. And when it arose against me, I caught it by the beard and smote it and killed it. Your servant killed both the lion and the bear, and this uncircumcised Philistine shall be like one of them, for he has defiled the armies of the living God." David said, "The Lord who delivered me out of the paw of the lion and out of the paw of the bear, he will deliver me out of the hand of the Philistine." And Saul said to David, "Go, and the Lord be with you." Then Saul clothed David with his armor. He put a bronze helmet on his head and clothed him with a coat of mail. And David girded his sword over his armor. Then he tried to go, but could not, for he was not used to it. And David said to Saul, "I cannot go with these, for I am not used to them." And David took them off, and he took his staff in his hand and chose 5 smooth stones out of the brook, and he put them in his shepherd's lunch bag, a whole kid skin slung from his shoulder in his pouch, and his sling was in his hand, and he drew near the Philistine. The Philistine came on and drew near to David, the man who bore the shield going before him. And when the Philistine looked around and saw David, he scorned and despised him, and he was but an adolescent with a healthy reddish color on a fair face. And the Philistine said to David, "Am I a dog that you should come to me with sticks?" And a Philistine cursed David by his hands. The Philistine said to David, "Come to me, and I will give your flesh to the birds of the air and the beasts of the field." Then David said to the Philistine, "You come to me with a sword, a spear, and a javelin, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the ranks of Israel, whom you have defiled. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hand, and I will smite you and cut off your head, and I will give the corpse of the army of the Philistines this day to the birds of the air and the wild beasts of the earth, that all the earth may know that there is a God of Israel. And all his assembly shall know that the Lord saves not with sword and spear, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give you into our hands." When the Philistine came forward to meet David, David ran quickly toward the battle line to meet the Philistine. David put his hand into his bag and took out a stone and slung it, and it struck the Philistine, sinking into his forehead, and he fell to his face to the earth. So David prevailed over the Philistine with a sling and with a stone, and struck down the Philistine and slew him. But no sword was in David's hand. So he ran and stood over the Philistine, took his sword and drew it out of his sheath, and killed him, and cut off his head with it. When the Philistines saw that their mighty champion was dead, they fled. And the men of Israel and Judah rose with a shout and pursued the Philistine as far as Gath and the gates of Ekron. So the wounded Philistines fell along the way from Sharim to the far Gath of Ekron. The Israelites returned from their pursuit of the Philistine and plundered their tents. David took the head of the Philistine and brought it to Jerusalem, but he put his armor in his tent. When Saul saw David go out against the Philistine, he said to Abner, the captain of the host, Abner, whose son is the youth. And Abner said, as your son lives, O king, I cannot tell. And the king said, inquire those sons. The stripling is when David returned from killing Goliath, the Philistine Abner brought him before Saul, with the head of the Philistine in his hand. And Saul said to him, whose son are you, young man? And David answered, I am the son of the servant Jesse of Bethlehem.